welcome. Nice to see so many friends in the audience. Thank you for coming. I'm going to start with a tune. Okay, that tune was called Inverness. It's a traditional Celtic tune, and I paired it with this painting that I did. The painting I called Dreaming at Inverness, or Inverness Dreaming, and that's the Inverness that Doug and I have been going to for the last 20 years up in Marin County, on the Point Reyes seashore. And it was, I would paint traditional plein air paintings at that earlier time, and Doug would take pictures of the wildlife, egrets and the herons and all the wonderful birds and animals up there. And one morning we were staying in a motel right on the edge of the slough, and I got up early and looked out, and I was just struck by the beauty. The mist was coming off the water, the hills were shrouded in mist, and then as the sun was coming up, the colors changed and everything. It was just magical. And so it was then I grabbed my watercolors and painted by the light of the microwave oven. So that became a ritual, and we kept doing that, and it led to my painting in this style that you see that I'm using now. Now I had planned this, I thought I had my talk planned out, and then of course I had to go on the internet, everything, to find out more than I needed to know about all that stuff. But anyhow, I did find a quote that I really liked a lot. It's, "Crystals, plants, and human beings are music that has taken on visible form." Now, I much prefer being called full of music to being full of something else, so I really like that quote a lot. Then I learned that a man named Stephen Palmer at Berkeley had done research into having people listen to music and see what colors came up, and that they were seeing similar colors. They were in Mexico, somewhere in California, but they were hearing Mozart, and they got similar colors coming up. Now, they didn't have the luxury of having my tunes. They had to settle for Mozart, so I thought we'd rectify that tonight, and I'd like to play a tune of mine, and I'd like you all to close your eyes and see what, just notice what colors seem to occur. It can be black or white as well as the spectrum. And, you know, it can be one color, 2, 3, or maybe you won't see any. But anyway, if you'll close your eyes, we'll do this scientific experiment here to see what happens. This is a tune called Claire's Waltz that I wrote for my friend Claire. Okay. You want to talk about what colors they, well, I can, okay.
I actually didn't see any colors. I was trying. I didn't see any, but when I thought of what color I ought to be seeing, or the music made me think of, it was green.
Ah, I thought of green and yellow.
Okay, good. Amy?
I saw kind of blues and greens together.
Good.
Some greens and browns.
Okay.
Red.
Red? You saw red? There's one in every crowd, right?
You're not gonna
There's no right or wrong answer here. It's just, you know, I'm interested in knowing what the people, what kind of red? Was it bright?
Bright. As the
happy
notes
red?
got higher and higher, it got brighter and brighter.
And light or dark?
Light, yeah, orangey red.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
I got yellow, but I got the word yellow and not the color yellow, and I was wondering if I might have been influenced when you started talking about Claire and your grand, and I assumed it was grandchild, and then I thought of children, and I always think of sunshine with children, and I don't know if that was part of it.
Well, it could be. Anyone else? Let's see what anybody's, Linda?
Yellow and green.
Yellow and green, okay. George?
The silver and the black pinks, flicks coming out, and that was tied to your thinking.
Spoken like a photographer, right? Black and silver. Phil?
Nice bright sky blue, and then shot with black. Whether it's a color or not, but it was part of the pattern.
Anyone else? I'll show you the painting that I felt it worked with particularly, and you can see that. The greens, the blues is sort of silvery, and the deeper, not black, but in the dark blue spectrum there. So this is a piece that I composed in my studio at home. Anyway, one of my other favorite places to paint is Lake Tahoe, and Doug and I have gone up there, and I've also gone up there with my women painting companions. And am I blocking? Okay, so the first day, the first morning I got up, it was totally clear, and when the sun gets over, I'm looking west, so when the sun hits those hills, I get really, really red. Maybe not, I exaggerate, of course. But, anyway, that was the feeling of it, with the very clear air, and, much warmer kind of feeling. And then the next day, I got up again a little before dawn, and I'm not seeing much for quite a while. Now I'm seeing this, what is this going on? It seems smoky, and it turned out it was smoke. This was last September. It was smoke from the Big Sur fire blowing all the way up to Lake Tahoe. So, but I loved the way it looked. I didn't want to go out and breathe it particularly, but I I painted this, and one of the things you can notice, and I won't make you, you'll get tired. One of the things that I like to do is leave spaces for people's eyes to wander around in the painting. So here, where everything was pretty well spelled out because it was clear and that was the feeling I wanted, I just left one right about there. You can even put it before your arms fall off, you know. But this, because there was smoke coming in front and in and out and all that, and so I wanted this kind of feeling of mystery and the blue being, now the tune Claire's well said I play that you picked out largely cool colors except for Karen. So the cool blues and greens that you got, this is cooler. You got the gray, the blue down grays, and then there's the more brick red orangey in there too that I like. And I think partly because I was thinking fire, so I exaggerated that a bit. But in a painting, it's generally going to be mostly warm or mostly cool. You don't really, we talk about balance in painting, but we really don't want an equal amount of everything. If everything were equally dark, equally light, you know, it just wouldn't be very interesting. But so anyhow, this painting, yeah, you really can't put it down. Thank you. I had a composition that I had written on the mandolin called Garrapana Walls, so that's another place I love to paint, and I thought, well, that thematically it went with it, but then I found that it also, I think, works with it for a few reasons. One is there's a lot of tremolo in this particular piece, and I feel like these bleeds that I do kind of correspond to tremolo on the mandolin. And the other thing is that Garrapata waltz is a minor waltz. There's a seat up here if you like. But I have a middle section of it that's major. So since this has a fair amount of major in it, but it's mostly minor, I thought that would work. So what I'd like you to do is look at the painting while I play the mandolin and kind of play the painting. It just strikes me that, okay, we play music, there's an elapsed time with music. With the painting, you know, it's painted, it's finished, but maybe it's not finished. Maybe it's not finished till people actually look at the painting. And I've left all these nice little handy passages for you to wander around in, so I just like, you know, I'll play Garrapata Waltz and just enjoy wandering around the painting. thing that I've noticed in this particular kind of painting, I have to paint in a hurry because, well, for one thing, I mean, Picasso said he painted fast to keep from getting in his own way, and I feel that way too. Not that I'm comparing myself to Picasso, but I do need to paint quickly, with quick gestures, and also my paper will get too dry if I take too long. But I wanted to show you this because, well, this is the quickest painting I ever did, actually, that came out. But see the gesture here, and this is going over dry paper, and then here it's bleeding under the wet paper. Is this, you know, but if you imagine it, it would not, you know, it wouldn't be anything if it were carefully drawn out and filled in, or, you know, whatever. So it's just, that's one of the things, is there's a big difference between a line you draw really fast and a line that you take a lot of time with. Which is why I can't copy myself, I think, you know, when I think, oh, I'm going to copy that painting, not exactly, but do it better. Doesn't work. I'll pass this around because it's kind of small. And of course, when I work, by working fast, a lot of times I fail, you know, really badly. So, but what I do actually, one way I discovered the correspondence between the music and the painting was, when I finish a painting, I put it up on an easel and I sit with my mandolin and I noodle around on the mandolin and I look at the painting. And then if my eye gets caught somewhere, I think, you know, and then I analyze it with my lazy left brain. And if it's hopeless, I give it to Doug, my talented husband, who also makes these lots of watercolor. So you can see he has plenty of material to work with. And I played in a Celtic band, and I'm the cute one in the middle there. But, yep. It's even practical, you see. I'm sure there are a lot of occasions you could wear one of these.
Are those all rejects?
Absolutely. Well, once I got the piles confused. Didn't tell them, oh. But usually it's worked out.
We need to go to one of the Queen's parties.
But anyway, some of the other things just that I have discovered in doing watercolor differently from how I used to. I really push whatever and play with different things. And this part is, the red is actually watercolor right out of the tube, and with just a slightly damp brush to get that in, again, working fast so that it skips. And then the rest of the painting very transparent. So I'm going to pass this guy around too, so you can see it better. But you see these bleeds, which again I feel like the tremolo is sort of analogous to that.
Do you turn the painting upside down to do that?
Hmm?
Do you turn the painting upside down to make them do that?
Oh, I do sometimes, you know, to check the composition. And also you can use a mirror too to see things like that will sometimes point out problems that you didn't see before. So I guess that's good.
Do you use a wet brush, wet paper, both?
I soak the paper when I'm home, and if I'm out, I just really wet it with a spray bottle and dipping a big brush into water, and I get it wet. And at home, I put it on a board that is, it's a special art board that'll take paper and paper affixes itself to it when it's wet. So you can paint on it without tape, which I like. Especially because the paper companies have gotten chintzy and are starting to make paper smaller and smaller, so then they don't fit your maps. And so anyway, it's nice to be able to use the whole paper.
In this painting, this, what looks like a face in the cloud, is that just,
That's your gestalt, not mine.
I guess so.
But that's
That's my
fine.
wife's.
But that's fine. It's all good. This is another, this painting actually, just to prove to you, I don't just paint in the middle of the night when I can't see what I'm doing. This is actually, I did this out up on the Carson, off the Carson Highway, and the same trip that I did the Tahoe. And this was September. One of the things that I'm involved with is creating an illusion of space. And here I especially wanted to do it because I wanted the distance of the distant peaks. So this is, I tailed that out a lot. But this is with the ochre. It's the warmest, so it comes forward and you go right into that. And then I felt like these are musical sort of progressions going up there, rhythms, the repetition that you get from music and also in art. One thing too, a line that goes up like that. We see it as rising because we work from left to right, and mostly well, this tune that I'm going to play, which is it's a 300-year-old composition by the wonderful Celtic composer Trellico Carolyn, and the shape of the tune is very like this. It's going up with lots of rhythms, gets up to the top and then comes down just a little bit, and so to me it works well with that. But a lot of paintings, you don't know where to enter them. I mean, you can enter them wherever, but here I think you sort of want to come in on the foreground and then work your way up and play around that way. But it seems to me that's kind of how that works. And this is called Carolyn's Draft. Now, I had to work hard to create a sense of the third dimension. Doug, of course, works in the third dimension, and he will talk to you about his sculpture.
Just as Anne plays on the mandolin and plays with her paintings, I play, of course, with material and space. I would like to read a definition of sculpture to begin. This was said by Barnett Newman, the color field painter of the mid-20th century, well known. He said, "Sculpture is what you bump into when you back up to see a painting." Well, he's very arrogant fellow. But the point is well said in terms, of course, sculpture is a three-dimensional material, in space. And in the 20th century, many critics and art historians consider the use of space as a material to be one of the major elements of our modern and postmodern sculpture. So, of course, with me, I'm definitely working with space as a material. And I might mention parenthetically, we listen in our home when we are working in the studio to a lot of mandolin music, as you might imagine. In fact, most of the music we listen to is mandolin based, including jazz, classical music, bluegrass music, and Celtic music, of course. Mostly we listen to instrumental music. It simply kind of allows us, or allows me, to, as Anne mentioned previously, to put my critical and logical facility to one side and to let my intuitive abilities flow out almost as if it's sort of magically happening. I'm the agent, obviously, but I have a sense that I'm not actually doing it. It's kind of strange that way. I have to, again, as Anne put it, get out of my own way by allowing it to happen without the words coming to tell me, why are you doing that? That's always a good question. In this particular piece, you can see how I've used space throughout it to actually unify the piece, as well as establish rhythms with the various spaces with my ribbons of bronze. All of my work is in bronze. I've been working in bronze for 47 years. Still love it, still have been enthralled by it. It's always challenging and it's always fun. I love to make messes, and it's very messy. In order to do this kind of very space-oriented sculpture, I work in wax. Wax has many virtues and some deficits. Most halfway reasonable sculptors work in clay if they're interested in getting a bronze. I work in wax because, unlike clay, it does not require a framework or an armature in order to make the piece. Clay is not self-supporting, so any clay work of any scale demands an internal framework, usually of metal. As a consequence, the artist is absolutely committed to the particular idea before he even puts any clay on the framework. And in my particular work, because I work in wax, it's self-supporting. It's a rather hard wax, so I can heat it up. It's loose enough to work with my hands. I can get it into the basic forms and shapes, and then refine it with the use of electric hot pencils and electric soldering iron. Melts all the wax together as I'm working it as a single whole, a composition. In my case, whole is both spelled with a W and an O, or excuse me, an H. It just seems like an O. It's a whole. But that is the major virtue of wax, and one reason I work with it, even though the difficulty with wax, it takes a very long time, because I'm actually refining it and carving it and having to take it apart in order to work with it. It's a long process. This took several months in order to do the original. The same is true of this particular piece. Again, because I'm working with wax, it's able to change and evolve, or I'm able to change it and evolve it as I'm working, because the framework is not there. Therefore, I can move it, can change it, twist it, eliminate the excess, try different things with it. And that's one of the reasons I love working with wax. Unlike Anne, who works obviously with color from the very beginning, in my situation, I'm fundamentally working with forms in space. So the color consideration does not come in until the end of the process. The wax I happen to work with is happens to be in a pink color.
Ready for that?
Yeah, we're getting close. So what I'm going to have to do before I get into color, we'll work with this particular piece. Once I do the original carving in wax, this happens to be one of a kind, which makes the explanation a little simpler. So I'll start with my original carving. I will then take it to, I'm fortunate, we have a wonderful foundry in Sand City called the Monterey Sculpture Center. I will take the piece to the Monterey Sculpture Center, the wax. They will add on a large wax cup. And from that cup, it will be physically melted to this piece. And then they will run wax bars, or else wax tubes, I guess would be a simpler way to, from the cup to the more delicate areas down here to the quail in this particular case, and to some of the mass down at the points. So now we have a big wax cup and we have tubes running around this. We'll pretend this is wax. They next take it and dip it into a material called ceramic shell. This is a little bit later, but you can still see the hopefully you can see the ceramic shells buried in the pit. In an earlier part, as the wax was dipped approximately 6 to 7 times in a material somewhat like plaster of Paris and reinforced with various grades of sand to build it up and thicken it. This material is put into a furnace where the wax is physically melted out. Cups are heated to about 1400 degrees. So if there is any residue, it's turned to ash at that point. Then the now empty cups, these are empty, have been put into a kiln, basically fired around 1500 degrees, and are brought out in a big cart filled with sand that supports all of these cups. And to the empty cups, the founders will pour the bronze into approximately 2100 degrees Fahrenheit. That's why it's basically the color of lava. And it's pretty, they have to know what they're doing. After they have poured in the molten bronze, and we have the bronze inside the shell, they knock off the shell after it's cooled, clearly, cut off the big wax cup, cut off, you can, I don't know, from that distance you can see the little wax, now bronze tubes. They cut those off, give it back to me in the bronze state. Now it's bronze, but it will have where the cup was attached and the tubes were attached. I take this to my shop and I grind these all down with the use of high-speed air tools. And if any welding is necessary, which fortunately this was a single casting, so it did not require welding, I do the welding, and then I have to regrind the weld. And then finally, I will clean it with a very fine sandblasting and go back to Monterey Sculpture Center. And there, this is my paintbrush. This is where the color comes in. This is Derek Bella. He's been a patina artist craftsman for 26 years. And he knows all there is to know about patinas. The patina is the artificial chemical oxidation of the metal. It's a very light acid bath that actually bonds with the bronze as on a molecular level. So it's not like a paint on the surface, it's actually a physical bond to the metal. And what happens, I go to the foundry and discuss with Derek the colors that I want. And after our discussion, as you can see in these photographs, he has a propane torch shooting about a flame about 18 inches long in one hand, and the chemicals are in a spray bottle in the other. And then he does a kind of dance with the torch and the spray bottle, depending on the kind of patina that I request. In terms of the color decisions I have to make, one of the most obvious is to go with either a warm color or a cool color, such as, of course, here the cool blue of this particular piece, and the warmer as also, this was a darker base with the stilt, and the warmer tones in the case of the quail. So what he's going to do is, or after I've talked to him, he is going to basically start with the spray and turn it typically either completely black, or in the case of the blues, in the case of the blues, completely black, or in the case of the lighter tones, completely white, with a series of chemicals. So he's got his torch, he's gradually turns it white in this particular instance. Then he will cut in the black tones with another series of chemicals. And then finally he will cut in the browns and the reds with a final set of chemicals. And he will go back and forth building up the layers. So we're also deciding not only about warm and cool and lightness versus black. This would be, I called it a medium. He was shooting for a medium color. And also the difference between opaque and transparency. You can see probably when you come closer that there's a sense of transparency with this patina approach, because you can see through the various layers, so to speak. So that's how color gets involved with the bronze. And now back to Anne.
Yeah, can I ask one question?
Yes, sure.
Your technique sounded like you can only make one, and then everything's destroyed.
That's exactly right. The only way to make more than one is to make a flexible rubber mold off of my original wax, which is what I've done. And these two have additions of 12, because I made a flexible rubber mold off of the original so that I could do that. There's so much time involved, it's the only way I can do it to make sense. But if I'm in a real-time bind, I will sometimes just make an original and cast it. That's another virtue of working in wax. If you work in clay, you must make a mold. You cannot cast clay.
But I think, I don't know, did he understand that each one starts as a wax, but that each of those shells are destroyed every time?
Yeah.
Yes, every
They're all destroyed.
Every piece that you see has to go through that same process. Everyone has a shell. The wax is melted out, the bronze is poured in. I have to work on it, and then it has to be patinaed. So not much of a mass production process. In fact, I only do one at a time, because I want to make sure that the founder can get the right temperature for my rather delicate work.
One of the things that line, of course, is a very important part of composition. Some artists will say line is the thing from which everything evolved, but I look at it as color because I paint with color, so I have a colored line. And in this case, the blue is a line, or maybe it's a shape. I call it a path because how wide is a line before it becomes a shape. Anyway, it goes here, but because I've interrupted it, it's a subtle line, but nonetheless it's important because it anchors all this activity going on. There's this storm coming up behind, and there are all the lake with a lot of reflections down below. So your eye goes down, but it always comes back up to this blue line. And in that tune, Claire's Waltz, that I wrote, I had a line with B was the anchoring note. Things would go above it and below it, and they anchored it. So I think you all have been a super audience, and I think you've played my paintings. You know how to play them now, so I thought maybe in ending you would like to play this painting for me, and I will play a tune that I wrote that I think kind of goes with it.